Question 1. What is the core principle behind Role-Based Access Control, RBAC? Option A. Assigning individual permissions directly to each user for every resource they need to access. Option B. Granting access based on a user's physical location and IP address. Option C. Aggregating permissions into roles and then assigning users to those roles to inherit access rights. Option D. Allowing resource owners to grant or revoke access at their discretion. The correct answer is aggregating permissions into roles and then assigning users to those roles to inherit access rights. Here's the explanation. The overview states, instead of assigning individual permissions to each user, RBAC aggregates permissions into distinct roles. Users are then assigned to one or more roles, inheriting all the permissions associated with those roles. Question 2. In an RBAC system, if a user is assigned the reader role at the subscription level and the contributor role for a specific resource group within that subscription, what are their effective permissions for resources within that specific resource group? Option A. They will only have reader permissions as the subscription level role takes precedence. Option B. They will only have contributor permissions as the more granular role takes precedence. Option C. Their effective permissions will be the sum of both roles, granting them, contributor, access to resources within that specific resource group. Option D. Access will be implicitly denied due to conflicting role assignments. The correct answer is, quote, their effective permissions will be the sum of both roles, granting them, contributor, access to resources within that specific resource group. Here's the explanation. The exam tips state permissions are additive. In most RBAC systems, if a user is assigned multiple roles, their effective permissions are the sum of all permissions granted by those roles. Since contributor includes reader, the user effectively has contributor access to the RG. Question 3. Which statement accurately describes the implicit deny principle in RBAC? Option A. Explicit deny permissions are always present and take precedence over any grant permissions. Option B. If a permission is not explicitly granted to a subject, access to the requested action is blocked by default. Option C. All actions are permitted by default unless an explicit deny rule is configured. Option D. Users automatically inherit all permissions from their parent management group, overriding any denials. The correct answer is, if a permission is not explicitly granted to a subject, access to the requested action is blocked by default. Here's the explanation. The key features/components section mentions implicit deny, a fundamental security principle where if an explicit permission is not granted, access is implicitly denied. The exam tips reinforce this. If a permission isn't explicitly granted, it is implicitly denied. There are no deny permissions in the positive sense. Rather, the absence of a grant means denial. Question 4. An organization wants to ensure that all newly created Azure storage accounts within a specific subscription automatically have HTTPS enforced, and any existing non-compliant storage accounts are brought into compliance. Which Azure policy effects should be used to achieve this automated enforcement and remediation? Option A. Audit effect only. Option B. Deny effect only. Option C. Deploy if not exist and/or modify effects. Option D. Append effect only. The correct answer is deploy if not exist and/or modify effects. Here's the explanation. The "deploy if not exist" effect can automatically deploy a resource or configuration, like enabling HTTPS, if the evaluated resource doesn't meet the condition. The "modify" effect can be used to alter properties like enabling HTTPS on existing non-compliant resources. Both are used for automated remediation. Audit only reports non-compliance, and deny blocks creation/update but doesn't remediate existing resources. Question 5. A security administrator needs to implement two distinct governance requirements in Azure. 1. Ensure that only members of the Azure admins group can create new virtual machines. 2. Ensure that all virtual machines created must use approved SKU sizes, e.g., standard_D2s_V3 or smaller. Which two Azure services should be used to enforce these requirements, respectively? Option A. Azure policy for both requirements. Option B. Azure RBAC for requirement 1. Azure policy for requirement 2. Option C. Azure RBAC for both requirements. Option D. Azure blueprints for requirement 1. Azure policy for requirement 2. The correct answer is Azure RBAC for requirement 1, Azure policy for requirement 2. Here's the explanation. Azure RBAC, role-based access control, controls who can do what, permissions, so it's used to restrict who can create VMs. Azure policy controls what times resources can be created and how times they are configured, so it's used to enforce specific SKU sizes or other resource properties. Question 6. An Azure policy initiative is assigned to a management group, requiring all resources to have a cost center tag. Due to a specific business reason, a particular resource group within one of the child subscriptions needs to be temporarily excluded from this tag enforcement. Which Azure policy feature allows for this temporary exception? Option A. An exclusion within the policy assignment. Option B. An exemption for the specific resource group. Option C. A. Disable. Effect on the policy definition. Option D. A. Deny. Effect at the resource group level. The correct answer is, an exemption for the specific resource group. Here's the explanation. An exemption is used to grant a resource or a hierarchy of resources an exception from a policy or initiative assignment for justified business reasons, often with an expiration date. An exclusion is defined within times the assignment itself to prevent a certain child scope from inheriting the policy, but an exemption is a separate object for temporary, justified exceptions. The disable effect deactivates the entire assignment, and deny is an effect, not an exception mechanism. Question 7. Which of the following best describes the primary function of Azure Blueprints? Option A. To deploy individual Azure resources using imperative scripts. Option B. To define a repeatable set of Azure resources, policies, and role assignments that implement organizational standards and governance. Option C. To monitor the performance and health of Azure resources in real time. Option D. To manage and orchestrate containerized applications across multiple Azure regions. The correct answer is, to define a repeatable set of Azure resources, policies, and role assignments that implement organizational standards and governance. Here's the explanation. Azure Blueprints is a service that enables defining a repeatable set of Azure resources, policies, and RBAC assignments to ensure consistent and compliant environments. Option A describes ARM templates or PowerShell/CLI. Option C describes Azure Monitor. Option D describes AKS or other container orchestration services. Question 8. A cloud architect wants to ensure that all resources deployed by a blueprint assignment cannot be accidentally deleted or modified by users. Which Azure Blueprint feature should be utilized for this purpose? Option A. Dynamic parameters. Option B. Version control. Option C. Resource locking. Option D. Management group support. The correct answer is resource locking. Here's the explanation. Resource locking is a critical feature that prevents resources deployed by a blueprint from being accidentally deleted or modified. Locks can be applied in do not delete or read-only modes. Dynamic parameters allow customization. Version control tracks changes. And management group support allows assignments at a broader scope, but none of these prevent accidental modification/deletion. Question 9. Which statement accurately describes the relationship between Azure Blueprints and Azure Resource Manager (ARM) templates? Option A. Azure Blueprints entirely replace the need for ARM templates in Azure deployments. Option B. ARM templates are a core artifact that can be included within times an Azure Blueprint, which packages them with policies and RBAC assignments. Option C. Azure Blueprints are used for imperative deployments, while ARM templates are for declarative deployments. Option D. ARM templates define governance standards, while Azure Blueprints deploy the actual resources. The correct answer is ARM templates are a core artifact that can be included times within times an Azure Blueprint, which packages them with policies and RBAC assignments. Here's the explanation. ARM templates define and deploy Azure resources and are a fundamental artifact that can be included within an Azure Blueprint. Blueprints provide a higher-level wrapper to orchestrate ARM templates along with governance artifacts like Azure Policy and RBAC assignments, ensuring a compliant environment. Blueprints do not replace ARM templates, they use them. Both are declarative, and ARM templates define resources, not governance standards directly. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel.